glad this is going on. I love fluffy stuff.
I'm going to go ahead and close the door.
Let me see if I can find it. I take so many pictures of it.
Hey, this one seems to be hitting the dinner rush. So come on up front, so we don't have to yell at y'all.
Are you going up to the chalet at 7:30?
It's close and personal. People pay real good money for this time.
Tomorrow. Is that tomorrow or tonight?
The TSR
Yes.
is tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
That's only part
It's
of
always
it.
Saturday night.
I was gonna say, we have amazing
No,
people
sorry.
at the daycare.
That's the problem.
And then one of our other cats was
Yes,
like,
whatever that is.
whatever
Whatever that is.
Oh, and then Jeri, they family found out they were little cats, and we had to take them. Like, oh no, hi. Oh shucks. Oh my gosh.
Yes, yes.
I asked one of you was that other guy we were like in the trash and one playing it.
Officially immersed.
But we
Yeah, I don't
publishing focus. But we took him to that noise. Oh yeah, he's definitely fun. And so like, oh, he's gonna be like calm and regal and big.
Really big?
And,
Yes.
and so we like got him, and he was pretty like calm. He liked to play with other cats. As he's grown, he's got like he like realized he was an orange cat. I don't know what happened. He's like insane now. And like we have these chopsticks that we train them with, so they like tap their nose on the chopstick, and he will literally carry them around the house until someone gives him a treat. Yes. And he doesn't even carry him sideways. He carries like the tip of it in his mouth.
We're going to go ahead and get
We
started.
learn different
This
places.
is publishing for indies and traditional. So if that's what you were supposed to be here for, all 5 of you, congratulations. Like it is, I guess this is like you're saying dinner rush. So
This is the dinner rush. I think.
So I have
people signed up.
yeah, I there was
That's
quite a
their
few.
work.
There was at least I think there's like at least 14 that were signed up.
Yeah.
So very
I guess
like
more people just try to
as it happens.
Yep.
So, but you're gonna get the first. We're gonna go ahead and just go down the line and just introduce. You got 7? Okay.
Wow.
I must be thinking of the other one from yesterday.
I don't know, we had so
And we've got
started,
2
and
hangers
they
on,
added
so there are a lot of people that are just
Right.
here.
So we're gonna just go down the line and introduce everybody so you guys know who they are. And then basically, Red's gonna go over and just give like a basic outline of what we're gonna be doing here today. So if you wanna go ahead and get started.
I go by Red. I write under the names Jeri Shepherd, Red Shepherd, and Maggie McMahon, and I'm both traditionally and independently published, so I can hopefully offer some insights on both of those. 31-year writing and publishing professional across genres, primarily sci-fi novels these days, and game writing and game development.
That's awesome. I'm Genna. I have my own law firm, Hibbs Law LLC. I've been doing this for over a decade. I'm an intellectual property law attorney primarily, but my background's in biotechnology and genetics. But I also, undergrad, I got an undergrad degree in English literature, specifically British Romantic poetry. So I can, enjoy doing that as well. But I'm here to hopefully help answer any legal questions we have.
You got no jobs in British Romantic poetry?
Well, it helps me with my patents for writing, because I have to write very technical poetry.
Less intelligible, the better.
I'm Steve Sullivan. In 1980, I joined TSR as an editor and worked on Basic and Expert and a bunch of other stuff as an editor. Then I was in the mapping department for a while. I've done comic books. I've written comic books. I've been part of a lot of comic stuff. I did the comics ads that ran for D&D and Marvel Comics, among many other things. And then I switched eventually from comics, went from games comics to novel publishing, and I've had, well, depending if you count collections, around 100 books published overall, and I'm a small publisher as well.
I'm Ivy Rue. So far, I've published 3 short stories, and then I am in a traditional publishing contract with Lucy Lantern Publishing.
Very proud to be for publishing. It's amazing.
Awesome.
I'm Jody Lyn Nye, and I'm in this weird place because I fumbled my way into Dungeons and Dragons when I was 19 years old. So, for all of you young men who think there are no women in gaming, I was claiming your grandparents. I'm mostly traditionally published, a very tiny bit of self-published. I've got 56 books, I think, and over 200 short stories, and I teach the writers workshop at Dragon Con, and I'm the coordinating judge of the Writers of the Future contest.
Oh, nice.
Cool.
Very nice.
Tell them what you did when you were 19.
When I was 19, I was dating Brian Bloom, who was at the time the president of TSR. And he signed me up for my first job in publishing, which was for $1 a page, typing up Gary Gygax's manuscripts for the Man's Guide, the Monster Manual, and the Dungeon Master's Guide.
Wow.
Okay.
Those are her words.
That's
Corrected spelling and stuff like that was me. I had nothing to do with the grids and the graphs.
How legible
Those
was
are
his
mostly
handwriting?
Frank.
I know.
Yeah, that's a good question.
How legible was his handwriting?
A lot of it was typed very irregularly, but
Okay.
his handwriting wasn't too bad.
It's pretty clean.
Yeah.
You wasn't like Ernest.
I'm glad that wasn't Ernest.
We worked with him. Hi, I'm Bill Fawcett. Been around about as long as Steve, a little longer. I've written about 25 books or co-authored, a lot of them nonfiction about history. I've been a book packager creating science fiction and fantasy books since about the early 80s for the legacy publishers. In that part, I've worked with them on several hundred books, like 6 or 7, and created the worlds for most of them. And independent, I'm published with Chris Kennedy last April, and with 4 books I'm involved with, 3 of them. 1 I authored, 2 I co-authored. And so I'm familiar with a bit of both. I've also worked in the industry of publishing as an agent and advisor, and I'm an adjunct editor for Bain. Other than that, I don't do much.
He serves cats.
Oh, and I
Yes,
founded,
yes.
and I founded Mayfair Games with 2 other people.
Wow.
Right.
I ran the Roll Aids line, created most of their board games, and I'm
He's the designer of Empire Builder, even though.
railroad game.
Yeah.
And so I've worked on a lot of game designs in various places. We won't go into the software company. Go ahead.
So I know, like, you're moderating, but Will,
Yeah.
I would love for them to hear, like, what you're bringing to this too.
Not much.
Go ahead, Will. Follow me.
Right, no,
Here,
thanks.
Will, Jody, Steve, we're all gonna sit down.
So yeah, I write for, I have my own independent publishing, Wicked Studios, where I write games and game designing stuff, usually mostly like adventure sort of things. I work with Cannibal Publishing as their art director, but also as a writer. So I worked on the latest thing that came out through them was the Greyhawk Gazetteer Revised, which took the old Greyhawk stuff and married it with the new stuff in the 2024 DMG. So I helped with the artwork in that. There's a follow-up companion adventure that should be dropping within the next couple of months, because everything's finally in. And I wrote the bulk of that. So that's basically, and I'm the moderator. So
Yes.
if I cut you off at any particular time or anything like that, don't take it personally. Basically, I'm just trying to make sure that everything rolls good and so forth. And Red's going to explain essentially a little bit more detail of exactly what we're going to be going into here and whatnot. And then after she's done with the explanation, we'll probably open up maybe to a few questions. If there's anything else that you guys would like to input before I start doing questions, we could do that first, just so we can get some more information out into their heads so that they can maybe get some other questions bubbling and percolating. So go right ahead.
He
So
writes good stuff.
he does,
Thank
like, all of this, I feel very humble right now. I mean, we just like sandwiched you by like,
I think I'm leading this.
the idea up here is that up here on this panel, you are looking at probably 2,000 to 3,000 different published works that have been covered amongst people on this panel. Everyone from like people who have done the hundreds, as well as people who are just breaking in and getting in. And that's because we want you to kind of get the scope of not just what I want to be in the year, I want to be tried, but like really what those different paths look like, what those paths can look like, how you can maybe develop a career, choose the different directions. And so we kind of wanted to purposely have a very large range of of experience up here in front of you so that you can learn about those different aspects. So really whatever you're asking, thinking, wondering, somebody up here should be able to cover that for you.
At the very least, they can make it sound like you know, right?
I can even talk about hot lead and how you used to set
Right, yeah.
if you want, because I'm a third generation.
I was gonna say, there's not very many people.
I thought there was a pretty
They
big
can't do
time.
How do you and I not know each other? It's really baffling.
Did anybody want to add anything else before I can start taking some questions or anything?
I guess I would just add that I am working on developing some modules for publishing, so I'm also kind of interested. in all the expertise.
I learn as much from these when I'm on them.
I tell you what, I'm trying to figure out how to do it too, so, yeah.
I'm really counting on her to get me not sued on a couple of things.
There you go, you're good at that.
Excellent. Does anybody have a question that they'd like to start off? That's okay. That's all right. We'll think of something to get the ball rolling. What would be a good place to start if you're looking to actually just starting writing, be it whether it's fiction or game design? Where's a good place to get your toes in the water and get you started with doing that? I know it's a big, broad question, but
People ask how to start writing and doing this kind of stuff. The answer I usually fall back on is it's butt in the chair. You have to actually sit down in front of your yellow pad or in front of your note cards or in front of your keyboard, whatever you choose to use. The actual discipline of sitting down and doing it is the thing that takes most people out of it. Because, they'll sit down and they'll start a sentence, and then they'll go get coffee, and then they'll, play with the cat, and then they'll revise the sentence. And the real trick to having the vast number of works that I've done is sitting down and going through, not second guessing on that first draft, and just getting the words out.
And finishing something.
And finishing.
yes.
That's the trick. The trick is finishing.
Your best idea is not as good as my crappy finished one.
Right.
And the best idea is not protectable.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, because your brilliant, perfect, unfinished thing is never going to see the light of day, whereas the crappy thing probably will.
You've read those crappy things and said, I could write better, right?
Yes.
But they're
Hopefully they're not being asked much, but
I have a whole shelf of books that I can do better than.
Oh,
And
yeah.
some of them are very famous
Did
people.
you have something that you wanted to
Yeah, so I actually, this is kind of embarrassing. The only things I've ever finished have also been published. So the best way for me, the best way for me to get over that, oh, I'm gonna go play with my cat, oh, I could be doing, like, actually sitting down and being focused is getting involved with those things. So it's like my wonderful mother, but you can also do this yourself, found this writing competition that she thought I should join. Because I'd always been writing, like, stories, but never something concrete. So that was the first time I actually finished writing my own short story. And it ended up doing really well in the competition, and it got into anthology for it. But I think that really pushed me to start thinking about it more seriously. So just getting involved in the community and doing things like that can really help.
Are you one of my?
I know, no,
Spark. Moonspark, okay. Moonspark.
yes.
Haven't you submitted the writers?
I did not know it existed.
Okay.
Now I know it exists.
Talk to the momager.
I was also like,
Yeah, the momager.
I'm gonna be talking to you after.
Yeah, let me bring that in because you're absolutely right. Competitions are excellent. The ones you don't pay
Never pay to be in.
never pay a fee to join a competition
I understand.
because it is a scam. It's a money gathering operation for the people who are doing it. And to publish an anthology at the other end is not that huge or great. Writers of the Future has been running now for 42 years. The anthologies that come out are big and beautiful. And there's an Illustrators of the Future competition, which was originally overseen by Kelly Freeze, whose name you should have.
Now Jeff, you.
And
Is Jeff working on that
No,
now?
who's working on, who's doing the art now?
Echo Chernick.
Alcohol, yeah, but who's the guy that was?
She's the coordinating judge for the illustrators. Anyway, it's a free competition. You can enter 4 times a year, which means that you have the impetus, which is a lot of the problem for young writers, of actually finishing a short story 4 times a year and sending it in. Kevin J. Anderson entered something like 25 times and never won.
He's now a judge.
Yes, it's
And probably richer than all of us.
Except for Rita.
And Brandon also.
Oh, and Brandon Sanderson, who,
I've been on the
as you may know,
We know a little bit.
right. But the whole point is, it gives you something to strive for. And the prizes for winning the contest are really, really nice. You get sent to Hollywood for a whole week. You get prize money, you get trophies, and you get attention from publishers and producers because it is held in Hollywood. But it's free to enter. You can do anything from flash fiction up to 17,000 words for a short story.
Long short.
It's a very,
Yeah,
It's a long
I
short.
can take that too.
It's
it's like half of a short novel.
Love that.
well, that's just it.
Yeah.
The opportunity is there. It's free to enter. It's
Yes.
it's a great thing to enter contests, to send things to magazines, and if you fall in love with a particular kind of magazine, you will end up writing the kinds of things that you read most of the time. So that's fun. So look on your shelf, look in your magazine box and say, who do I read? What are their parameters? What are their guidelines? All of the publishers have guidelines online. You can read them. They'll take up to blank number of words. They pay blank number of cents. And SFWA.org has writers markets listed. There
Science
are-
Fiction Writers of America
Yeah, sorry.
often said SIFWA among people that
Yep, like,
did in them.
yeah, I'll say that. But also, there are a couple of pages on Facebook where there are open markets for both novels and for short stories. Look at those. These things should inspire you because these are people who are actually willing to pay money, sometimes not very much, in order for you to give them your fiction. So that's an opportunity right there.
And
This
the
is
money
really,
grow too. So like once you're in that, you're going to come to events like this, and you've got one more book on your table that builds out your reputation as a writer. So that's short stories, good way to fill your sales table quickly, good way to fill your website quickly with this and that, and to be beside people. Oh, this was the same collection that you can name all of these greats that have been in that collection over the years, and you've been in it too. So it kind of like builds you up in multiple ways. You're getting that initial, then you're getting the sales, and then you're getting the kind of connection, that sort of like second degree connection to a lot of people who've had success in that same. It's very, very well respected. I always pick that one up.
Is there an age limit for the?
There-
I just looked at the rules and it does
No.
not appear there's age limit.
yeah. Younger than Brandon, 15
Don't tell me.
years is age.
Writer, and last
Great.
year's grand prize winner was 68.
Okay, that's cool.
So-
I still have time.
But you can't be a professional
Oh,
author.
they have to be younger than me. And Steve.
No, they have to
I still have time.
be,
Yeah.
they have to be younger than Larry Niven.
Well, Larry's only 2 years older than me.
Oh, he's not. Isn't he 90?
What they said is really important. It's really important you don't pay people to look at your stuff
Yes.
as
Never.
part of a contest.
Yeah.
Never, ever do that.
Money only flows out if you know someone and you're paying them to do a specific thing that they already have their reputation for being accomplished at, like a book doctor or an editor.
Right.
Other than that, money should never go in the other direction, and that includes agents, editors, anything that are approaching you. That's always the other way. It's all scams. Author Beware is available online.
Writer beware.
Writer Beware from SFWA all the time.
And predators and editors.
Well, that's a good one. I like that.
All right, now, there's 2 questions really here. One is, what markets are available? And you haven't touched on gaming yet, which is, got some great opportunities to get you started, and there's a lot of crossover now. You do the gaming stuff, you can get noticed as a writer at this point. It wasn't that way 40 years ago, but it is now. The first question is, what markets are out there? Small presses are always looking for things relating to their stuff. particularly if you create a module for a lesser known role-playing game or something, just to have created a module, and if it gets printed. And you can say, I did this, this, and this when you approach someone a letter time. In other words, you can build a resume up with smaller companies. Small presses are the same way. Less distinguished because, let's be honest, while there's many good and careful independent publishers, there is about 70% dreck out there in independent published books at this point. And they're offensively unreadable or offensively badly structured or all of the above.
Right.
So, okay, so you can look at the small game market to break in. You can look at the short story and submit. There are open calls, there are contests, there are a number of opportunities there. You can also write short stories about your favorite game world and let that publisher have it and publish it and get noticed for doing it. Even though you're not going to get, let's face it, you're not going to make a lot of money on your first 10 short stories. It's just not, they don't, I pay Larry Niven 15 cents a word. Harry Turtle does my top one at a quarter a word. But his name sells a lot of books. So, if you're
getting into writing to get rich, you're in the
You're
wrong
in the wrong
business.
A very quick story about that. A cousin of mine who's an attorney, some years ago, called me up and said, I'm tired of being an attorney. I think I'll be a writer instead. How much do you get paid a year? I said, Ben, I don't really think that you're cut out for this.
He's still an attorney, he changed areas.
There was that,
Couldn't take the 80% pay cut.
that show, The Castle, they have this monologue in the beginning, and he's like, you know, there are two people that obsess about killing, that obsess about murder, axe murderers and writers. I'm the one who makes more, and I'm like, oh my god, this is a show about an axe murderer. Like, administrator writers not making more money.
Well, even he talks about his 10 years starving to death with
Yeah,
his mother, the actor,
exactly.
before his series finally caught.
Right.
Before he was an overnight success.
Right.
Well, I was at the London Worldcon, and George Martin was there.
Yep.
Or he added later. And nobody knows what it stands for, including him.
It just sounds
Cunningham
good.
says it's too many R's. He says it's
Yeah.
George, too many R's, Martin. That's
Anyhow, and as he was in line, and I was working with Ace, and so I knew George from about 1980 or 81 when he was doing
Twilight Zone.
Twilight Zone episodes, and what was it?
Beauty and the
Right.
Beast.
Steve.
So you read
the
Wild Cards at that
superhero
time?
series? The dark one?
Oh, yeah, the wild card.
Wild Cards,
Yeah.
which he did the
Which
first
is-
one in about
Which is still
80.
happening.
In about 80. And so it's now, like 2016 or 12 or whenever, when Game of Thrones just went big, and and he's got an enormous line, and I went by and, hey, George, isn't it nice to be an overnight success? He worked at 45 years before he was making his bundle.
And you may never make a bundle.
And, yeah,
So you
tell
should-
me about it.
We want them to be writers. We want them to be writers.
No, we want them
But that's
to be
not
writers,
why.
but we don't want to,
Okay.
we really don't want them sitting there saying,
Right.
I will never get a side job, I will never have another job because my writing is gonna make it big.
Right.
Don't quit your day job,
They're-
Yeah.
please.
Or, have a spouse that can help support you.
Or do the things that are a part of your writing life or adjacent to the writing for others. Become that paid editor, become that paid layout designer, become a publisher who can great, not just my books are paying my bills, but also doing these other skills, be a hired writer by the game
I
company.
got into writing and editing to finance my writing because you couldn't live on my writing.
Exactly.
And I made too much writing and editing and packaging to afford to be writing. I made a living doing both. So I started again 5 years ago after a 35-year layoff, except for my nonfiction work.
But honestly, almost every writer I know has some other means of income. And just understand that it's either you have a job and you're writing on the side, you have a spouse who has a job and is writing or not writing on the side, you have inherited money, Larry Niven,
Oh, lucky you.
Larry's grandfather
Wow.
registered the mineral rights for a good portion of offshore California. And he gets a royalty on the oil that comes out of several miles of the coast.
Nice.
He's
It's nice work if you can get it.
college professor, attorney, doctor. There are so many professions that people are also writing, and that's fine. Besides, it gives you a break from each profession, and let's be honest, the fallback is there. It means that you can not stress about writing because you have that other income. Because to say, oh my God, if I don't get paid by blank magazine, or if I don't get my royalty check, I'm not going to be able to have electricity next month. The second income helps.
Yeah, part of my job as book packager was to lend money to writers.
Yeah.
You know,
And I mean,
if you have
some
a
of
spouse
them-
or significant other, sometimes they're gonna be, you'll be able to trade off, you know, I mean, there was a time when I was doing a lot of writing and working home, and I was raising the kids. And my wife went back to school, and now we're in the opposite position where she's supporting me, and you have to be okay with that. It's really important that you be okay being a cooperative with someone that you're working with.
It's also
Whether
easier
a spouse
for
or a
writes more
parent or
talent
whatever.
than you.
Yeah.
Lynn Abbey and Robert Aspen did that for years. They took turns going back to work when they needed money. Otherwise, both of them were writing when the chips were good. But other than that, Lynn went back to work as a programmer, or Bob went back to work for IBM as a bookkeeper.
Until they divorced. But anyhow, all right, the second part of that question is, how do you get into these positions? Which is really, I think, what much of what you were asking. And I'll be very honest, I can give you all sorts of places to submit and all of that. And I would say probably 80% of it's meeting someone, knowing someone, or starting to do something. How do you do that? Well, walk into the dealer area and start talking to people. They love people who are interested in contributing. That's part of how I got going in Dungeons and Dragons because a friend of mine wrote me in just before the box set came out. And after the box set came out, we started playing. And a couple of years later, when it was catching big, and I was down there, he said, you got to meet these other people, and we're starting a magazine in Jorlowski. And he said, this is Tim Kask, and we need some stuff. And I ended up doing what I call the centerfold, those center games and play games for the first 45 issues. Bill, create a mini game for us. Bill, create a centerfold. Bill, create a Chosen Path adventure. I had a full-time job at an insurance company. That's how I got into writing in the game business. And that's what got me into writing in the regular business. So if you talk to game company people, if you meet people, if you associate with people, work with those people. Go through them, meet others. If you want to suck up to writers at conventions, it's good. They love buying free drinks. And
Networking is really huge. And some people are great at it. I've never been huge at it. But I know the people that I know that are always working are almost always the people that are best networkers. Which,
Like president.
I'm thinking Matt Forbeck.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
You know, they're just brilliant at that kind of stuff. But that shouldn't stop you from writing if you're like me and want to sit at home and type at your keyboard.
H.B. Piper never met an editor, never had an agent. Mailed his stuff to Ace and said, will you buy this? For a while, they had trouble finding him to pay him. That's about it. But he forgot. He didn't put return address on 3 of them. But he said, just go ahead and publish it, send me the money at your standard terms. And eventually they searched him out and got a contract, but it was in the early days when Tom Doherty was the editor at Ace and Joe Bain was his assistant. And they found him, and he did 18 books or something over the period, the Gunpowder War ones and the Hokas and everything, without ever meeting a single individual. On the other hand, there are authors like Bob Asprin and several others who made a point of being very social and going to conventions is normally the best place to meet these people, very honestly.
Yep.
Gen Con, Dragon Con, World Con, this
Any
con.
of the C2E2s or any of the comic
I wouldn't go to
related.
C2E2.
Well, some of them.
Well, for comics.
For comics, yeah,
Comics,
that's what
yeah.
they're working on.
But
Comics.
this is the only subgenre, this is the only genre that you can meet the editors and get to know them without feeling like you are approaching the throne. My romance writer friends say, "Oh no, I would never invite myself to my editor's house, or anything." And I said, my editor came into town unexpectedly, and she ended up sleeping on my couch.
Science fiction and gaming are wonderful in that the levels aren't there. The snobbery isn't there. They don't feel a need for separation. And romance has gotten better as they switch off. Our editors have gone over and taken it over anyhow, basically. Well, romance used to be about romance, and now it's about romance, time travel, and elves.
And
Vampires and werewolves.
to add something onto what they're saying, is anybody familiar with DM's Guild and Drive-Thru RPG?
Yeah.
Yeah, how many people in here are looking for writing for game design, that sort of thing? Somebody? Okay. So, and I know our Drive-Thru RPG has the same thing, but basically there are programs that they have on there where you can go on there and certain companies allow you to write with their IP, provided you go according to their guidelines and publish it through Drive-Thru. Doing DM's Guild, you're gonna publish according to WotC's regulations.
Wizards of the Coast.
Wizards of the Coast, sorry, thank you. They wind up owning what you write, but you can do that and you can start selling things through those online stores. And I know Drive-Thru has another, I don't know the specific, it's Drive-Thru something other where you can do writing and you can put it up there.
Drive-Thru Fiction. Drive-Thru RPG.
I would figure that, yeah. So those are places where you could go and you can do that sort of thing as well. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question. It has to do with that, and also the previous conversation about, where to submit your stuff, how to be published. What are the pitfalls? And this is kind of a conversation that happened a few days ago. What are the pitfalls of putting your stuff out there in the wild, unpublished?
Okay, let me talk about some of the pitfalls, and then I'll talk about one that you'll only think about later in your career. The pitfalls are not getting recognized. It's not the way to build a career. Diane Duane called it the Disney effect, or the Star Wars effect, because if you write a Star Wars novel, you will fit into a very, very tight strictures. You won't get a whole lot in the way of royalties, and any advance you get after that will be perhaps 20% of what you received for writing a Star Wars novel, because it is a Star Wars novel. It's not about you. The other thing is, especially because I did write a story for Wizards of the Coast, which is up online, is not only do you not own it, but you won't be able to publish it in any collection of your own work in the future. You do not own any rights to it.
All rights.
All rights are gone. You can say you wrote the story, but you can't reproduce it in any way. You have to steer people to where it is originally. And that's very frustrating. In my youth, I gave away the rights to a few short stories for anthologies, because that was the way that blank publisher was writing their contracts. I want them back. I will have to figure out how to get them, but I want them back.
There's actually,
Cute Genna.
there's actually a loophole. I think it's 35 years.
35
years. Yeah,
But you only have a 5-year window.
Put it in your calendar. That's for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah,
That's
we
a
do.
really cool feature that they have in copyright law. Yeah,
It's the only way to get books from Simon & Schuster.
Oh, well, yeah, definitely. It hurts my heart to hear that people are just giving like all of their rights away so that they can be in this particular like setting and stuff.
To just
Let her finish.
Thank you. But I would say that, if you are creating it, you're typing it, you are technically creating that copyright in its creation. Before you send it to anybody, just do your copyright registration. Just go to the copyright.gov website, find the correct form. That's the hardest part, is finding which form. Is it an audiovisual work? Is it a written thing, or is it, architecture? Just find the right form, and then it's like, what's your name? What's your birthday? When did you create the thing? What's the title? You submit a copy of it, and then that gives you all the tasty statutory rights to enforce your copyright if somebody copies you. So I would very much encourage you to have that registration in place before it goes out anywhere, because that's going to give you a lot of protection.
That said, publishers actually hate seeing a copyright notice at the bottom of the page. They really, really hate it.
Major
Because It does make you look amateur, and when you write it, it is copyrighted to you anyway.
It is.
Right.
But you don't get the statutory ability to sue, and you don't get the statutory damages. And so you don't even really need to put the notice on the bottom. You could send them in without the notice,
Send it in without the
but
notice.
put your registration in your pocket.
Now, two things on that. One, if you sign with a publisher for a short story or a novel, they should be doing a copyright registration on the work. And you want to make sure that's in your contract with them, that they are responsible for doing that. Doesn't cost them anything, but they've got to do it. The second thing is, and I have to admit, I advised Watsy to take all the rights because we were protecting the IP on our original world that we wanted no one else to be able to do anything further in. So we had to demonstrate that we controlled it all.
And now,
And I've
a
done
lot
that
of
when I
that,
was at Mayfair too.
well, sorry, I was just gonna add that, and now a lot of that, like with the OGL and everything, if you're going that route, it's trademarks. Like that's their hook is that it, this particular name for this potion is trademark. This character is a trademark concept.
And a lot of times they'll claim things that aren't even really trademarks.
Right,
There was a time.
There are certain like,
You remember
have
that?
always
I do. I was
existed,
gonna
like,
mention
characters that can't.
I was there.
Exactly. But I wanna go to another kind of step to that question, because I honestly feel like, so this is kind of talking traditional, and it's talking if it's published, and like putting it out there, it's like you're just giving it and all of that. There are kind of two other aspects to that. One is, what is your purpose for putting it in the world? Are you putting it in the world because you're wanting just your art to be recognized? Like you want to be recognized as an artist. I used to tell some of my students, I would be like, you know what? The more you had, everybody's afraid of, writers are so afraid of plagiarism. Beyond the rights piece, a lot of writers are afraid of plagiarism. It happens, don't be afraid of plagiarism. If you don't put it in the world, nobody sees it and nobody's gonna plagiarize it. So now you're yeah, exactly. So put it in the world. But then protect yourself, and also if you wanna put it in the world for, even if there are some that I've given away my rights on, that I'm okay with. Because it's like, this was a piece that was a paycheck for me.
Right.
And now I've got that bestseller. Now I've got that trad publisher. Now I've got that, maybe it was a co-writer, or that IP that I worked on. That's now on my resume, and that's a different kind of thing. But now this thing that I'm passionate about, my passion project, this one, well, you don't get this one for free. So you kind of have to decide for yourself what you're putting out, what you're looking to get out of that, and therefore what aspects you need to protect in it.
We talked about the money a little bit, but one of the things to know is that if you're looking to make money as a writer, writing for things you don't own will help pay the bills. And that's usually where the best money is, as a matter of fact. Right? I have friends that write Star Wars books. I wrote an Iron Man adaptation. I wrote 14 books in a boy detective series that my name is nowhere on them. But they paid the bills. And they paid the bills better than the kind of standard rate you get on a SIPWIT, a SIPWIT 5 cents a word.
And those would be a work for hire situation?
And they're a work for hire
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah.
If you're lucky, there's a royalty attached, but often there's not. Often it's just a flat
Usually
fee.
it's a project fee.
And
when
tragically,
I
that
go
flat
work for
fee
hire.
has not risen very much in the last 30
Listen, if
years.
it represents electricity and food, sometimes that's all the reward that you can really look
Right.
forward to.
One warning, anyone who says, write this for me, I can't pay you, but will make you famous and give you a lot of publicity.
Don't do that.
Because
Don't
if they
do
were
that,
able
don't
to do
edit
that,
that either.
they can afford to pay you.
Right. The
And
people,
my
usually the
response is
people that
then
want
why
you to do things for free have the money.
Go ahead.
First, I was apologizing a moment ago because I used to work for Simon & Schuster. I thought that was funny. That was right on. So that's why I was apologizing.
I work for them.
I wrote books for them, and I did, when you had the gaming division, I did one of the games for them too, one of the computer games.
I was in IT, so, I had nothing to do with any of
Well, you're
that,
not
but-
guilty of that horrible
Yes,
contract.
yes.
If they hadn't dumped my editor, I'd still be writing for them.
So, easy answer or easy question is the contests protect your works when you submit something in a
Yes.
contest?
Yes, Writers of the Future is really good about that because if they don't publish your work, it's yours again anyway. If they do publish it, they just want you to please hold off from using it anywhere else until after the book comes out, and then it's yours again
Yeah,
anyway.
6 months after.
And-
Well, Bain.com, the Bain contest is the same, the Tor contest is the same.
Okay.
If you get published by them, nice, you get paid, and normally they don't ask for permanent rights. No major publisher does.
Most
Usually
anthologies don't today. They're like a year,
2
maybe,
years or a
you know,
year.
2 years,
Yeah,
yeah.
no problem. And then it's back, and even the ones that asked for that, even when I was greediest, if I had to control this IP that you're writing in, you still got to put them in collections of your own works.
Right. And honestly, I think more than a year for first publication right is too long, especially in this volatile
Yep,
publishing
absolutely.
market we're in now.
Yeah.
So, you know, if someone wants to hold on to the rights for 3 years, well, maybe that's telling you they're not really that trustworthy. They're not maybe going to put it out for 3 years.
Yeah.
There have been, I've had contracts back in the day that were pay on publication, and I would go, no. And there was one that was being done by friends of mine that I said, no, you two people who you guys would know. I said, no, I'll do this work for you, but you have to pay me after I deliver it. You have to.
Whenever I get,
And the book never came out.
whenever I get a contract that says pay on publication, I write again dangerous visions on it.
Last
Last dangerous visions. 27 years in the making.
Wow.
Anybody else have a question? Anybody?
Mr. Ryan,
Speaking of, plagiarism, intellectual property rights kind of question, but I mean, it's easy to think you came up with an idea and it's
Ideas
been
aren't
done.
copyrighted or trademarked.
yeah, they,
Nothing protects ideas
correct. A copyright only protects the expression of that idea in a tangible medium.
and how you express it.
So if I say, hey, I'm gonna write a story about a girl that rides a dragon and becomes a king or a queen or something, and then you're like, oh, that's a great idea, and you go write that same idea, but you're gonna write it your way, and I'm gonna write it my way, and those are two different things, two different copyrights.
Well, when do you step over that line if I name that person Daenerys
Well, so that,
what it needs to become?
sure, and so that gets more into, to like, if you could go a few different ways. If you are writing in that world, you're like really taking those characters, you're creating a derivative work. You're like, I'm taking this thing, I'm making a different version of it. So then that is definitely like an infringement issue. And so then it's like, well, is it fair use? And so then you're doing an analysis of does fair use apply or not, or, you know, there's some other exceptions as well. But, you know, if it's the concept of a dragon per lady or whatever, and it's not specifically related, that's just, again, that idea, expression difference, which it should be fine, it should be safe unless, you know, it's not gonna prevent, you know, there's nothing that prevents businesses from going to court or people from going to court. There's no rule that you have to be a reasonable person to sue somebody else. So somebody can sue you, like they can't stop them from doing that, but like ultimately will they win? You know, that's a different question.
Could you explain the authors having to enforce their IP or lose it?
Yeah, and I made a little handout yesterday. So like the enforcement issue, like almost all claims in law have what's called a statute of limitations, or if it's a claim in equity, it's called estoppel. And so you have like a basic cutoff date. So you have predictability in our system. So if somebody does something, you have a certain amount of time, usually a couple of years, maybe more, to take them to court about it. If you don't, the time passes, the window closes, and it's done. And as it is, it is.
You write a book in someone else's world or with someone else's characters, and that person hasn't given you permission, and they don't enforce it, what happens? You don't go after them.
If they don't go after you and enough time goes by, then you're pretty okay.
Yeah, no, those
But don't
control
tell
of that IP.
Because there are the big corporations especially, they will sue you where they have no right to sue you.
Well, and it's not based on you publishing it either. It's based on their discovery of your infringement. So,
Yeah.
so it's a whole different parameter.
And also maybe just don't be a jerk. You know, just, maybe we don't steal from other people.
Don't take Batman and name him Nocturnal Man. Just kind of.
So I have a question, then. Let's take this a little bit further. So how does fan fiction fit into
Good
that?
question.
So, because there's tons of people that write fan fiction. So when does that cross the line? And when is that okay? When's that not okay?
Let me tell you about a time that it did not go okay,
Oh, yeah.
and it ended up in court. Chelsea Quinn Yarborough is the author of the Saint Germain historical vampire novel. There's like 25 of them.
Yeah, the original ethical vampire.
That's right. Quinn, of course, had an enormous following, and she had a fan who wrote to her and said, I really, really want to do a zine about Saint Germain, and I love it so much, I just can't resist it, I want to write this story. And Quinn said, I'm sorry, this is my bread and butter, this is how I make my living, this is how I pay for everything in my life. So I really appreciate that you like my work, but no, I do not give you permission to do a fan zine. That wasn't enough for the writer, who published a zine about Saint Germain and triumphantly mentioned in the introduction that she had asked for permission from Quinn, and Quinn had said no.
Oh.
Quinn took her to court. She won.
Yeah.
Obviously. But the person was suit-proof because she lived in her mother's apartment and did not own a car or practically anything else
There you
of
go.
value. But the judgment stood. And that has become, of course, a case to which people can refer when copyright violations do come up.
So it set the precedence then.
It's, well, it was long after other things had been happening. Paramount turned a blind eye to most Star Trek fan fiction, even when it hurt, the dirty stuff.
Slash.
Yes, slash fiction. Anne McCaffrey always said, you can write Pernie's fan fiction, but one, I will never read any of it because I don't want accusations of plagiarism. And I want you to know I will never read any of your work. Two, you cannot use any of my characters as main characters in your story. And so far, everybody has respected that.
Great.
Today. Yeah.
That's good.
And back on the enforcement piece, there's a lot of collective groups that have been popping up, and you can find, different groups, and basically they will go and like help police and enforce your copyright, and you can kind of pool your efforts, so it's a little bit easier for them to go after like the bigger fish if they're really getting into things. So that's maybe an option too.
And a lot of times, stuff like that will go unenforced if you're not making any money from it. If you're just putting it out there in the world and it's not offending anybody, it's like, why should we sue this guy? Leave him alone. But once you start making stuff and making money off of it, then they're going, okay, that Star Trek fan fiction film that had the original cast members, that was fine up until you kickstarted it and you made over $1 million. Now we're not so happy.
I should have said there was a third thing in Anne's list is you must not make any money on it.
Right.
I've given permission dozens of times for 15 copies or
Oh,
40
interesting.
copies, and they're $1 a piece to pay for the paper. I don't know anything about this.
That's an interesting, way that you'll get that, give out that. I think that's pretty cool.
When I was in high school, I read the Ellie Monisset Saga of Recluse, which is like I don't know if anybody's heard of that series, but I decided one summer when I was graduating high school to make a game system for it, and I spent the whole summer on my little Dell making charts and stuff, and I found his address somehow, and I sent him a copy of it, and I said, I love your book so much, and I made this game series, and he wrote me back, and he was like, well, this is very thorough. I don't think I'm going to be interested in making any games, but good job, and don't sell it.
Don't sell it.
Well, and there are a lot of people, I know some really aggressive, writers, which, by the way, yay. Be hungry, what do they say? Be humble, be hungry, be the hardest worker in the room. So yeah, I'm good with that aggression, but if you said, you're like, I have this great idea, you put all of that effort into a manuscript, and you put it in an envelope, and you mail it directly to whoever, maybe it's the mouse ears that you're sending it to, they will send it back unopened.
Yes.
Unopened, because they don't want you to even have
They don't want
assume
any
that
chance.
there's a chance that you're gonna go after them and say, oh, they stole my idea for this movie. They will not open it. So you have now taken your very precious talent and time doing something that's not gonna go.
Get paid to sell it to.
I think we need to talk a little bit about parallel development, just so we know plagiarism and that kind of stuff. But there's also a thing called parallel development, which is, for whatever reason, that in the ether there's this idea, and sometimes two or more people will seize upon it at the same time. Sometimes it'll be someone, you know, if you send a thing into Marvel and you had a character name, and then the guy that's doing it, that's looking at that doesn't see it, but mentions it to someone else, you know, there's a character running around Marvel that's the same name of a character that I sent into one of their character creation contests. And Steve Englehart had written that, and I talked to him at a con about that once. He said, you know, I never saw it, and I wouldn't tell you if I had.
Yeah.
But I believe Steve. He didn't do that.
I would not believe Steve.
I had drinks with Steve much later on in life, so it's okay. But here's the other thing to know. There was a point not too many years ago when WotC had a world creation contest, right? And there was a pretty big prize attached to it. I think it was $100,000. Any of the rest of you remember this?
No.
This is where Ebron comes from.
This is where Ebron comes from, right? And the money was big enough that there were people like me and Gene Raby. Probably you guys know Gene Raby, Grandmaster,
Quite well.
all that kind of stuff. Yeah, you know Gene really well. Gene and I are old friends, right? And there was Gen Con that year came out, and they said, I think you could submit 3 ideas, right? And it was like a 2-page press. It was something very short.
Yeah.
That you could go out. And Gene and I met up. We hadn't seen each other in a while. We met up at Gen Con, and we said, and we were talking, got to talking about this, and said, well, what did you submit? And she said, I submitted one about this, and then I submitted this one about pirates, and right? And it was like, what did you submit? I said, I submitted this, and then I submitted this one about pirates. My idea were so similar.
Yeah.
That we actually ended up doing some books together and doing some anthology. But I mean, it was literally like, if you looked at it, and we hadn't talked to each other, and it was just the same idea.
Yeah.
And that happens.
Right, especially in circles like going to cons and stuff, you have a lot of people looking at a lot of the same media
Right.
all the time. So you're bound to have some overlapping. And like, one thing to focus on is don't be afraid of making sure your thing is 100% unique. Because I mean, human beings, it's pretty much impossible at this point in the world of writing.
Everything's
Exactly.
influenced by something.
Yeah.
When something big happens in the world, 18 months later, there will be movies and or books about that event. Dante's Peak, and I forgot the name of the other volcano thing, came 18 months
It's
after
called
Dante's
volcano.
Okay.
Volcano, the coast is toast.
Yeah, the one in LA.
Yeah, the one in LA was Tommy Lee Jones.
And Space Cowboys, after the huge asteroid coming towards Earth,
Oh, yeah.
suddenly there were 2 movies and several books about the same thing. Because human beings say, oh, isn't that interesting? And writers say, ooh, I can do that.
Right.
And what's interesting with that and these other stories we're having is how they tie in with that fair use test. And so it's like, how much of it are you taking and using? And then, did you have knowledge and access to the other work? Things like that. Like, these are the factors. And if you can knock one of those out really well, then you could be sit pretty in the
I think they have an idea of an example that you can tell me if I'm close to the mark on this.
It depends.
Historical fiction. So you have, let's say we have 3 people doing a story and it's all on the War of the Roses. So basically you're going to be using the same characters, so forth. And there's a lot of the same things that are going to be happening in all 3 of those books, but it's all in 3 different, your voice, your tone. And it's going to come at it all from different. So while it's all similar, but it's different. So is that close to sort of like what you're talking about?
Well, yeah, that's like one of the exceptions, is that you can't stop people from talking about history and facts,
Right.
Reporting on the news, those things.
Copywriting, trademarking Nazi.
Yeah, those are things that are important in societies, that we have a free, flow of information and that people are able to look at facts and history and like deal with those things. But I mean, technically, there's even copyright power in a phone book, but it's
Right.
not the names and the phone numbers, like those are facts. It's literally the creative arrangement of how they decide to arrange the phone book.
Layout.
And if you think that's easy to prove in court, it's
So IB, a phone book are these things we used to
Yeah.
get delivered on our front
Yeah.
Like, I pretend they were my spell books.
Nice.
Awesome, because names have power.
Yes, they do.
To
You can't steal that idea.
sort of,
Come at me, right?
I've been using a phone book for any. To sort of undramatize this a bit, no one's going to plagiarize every word in your novel. Or maybe not any of the words in your novel anymore, because it's real easy to get caught now.
Right. Oh, well, unless you're using AI to write your book.
No.
But don't do that.
There are AI detectors that you
And
can
it's not-
run stuff.
And it's not copyrightable. No, you cannot have copyrighted an AI-produced manuscript. The Supreme Court has spoken.
But the fact is that your unique approach, get it out there. I mean, I could ask everyone in this room to write a book about a short guy who gets a ring and has to get rid of it when there are thorns. Okay? It will not, none of you will write Lord of the Rings. Okay? You will write your own version of something. Well, even if they compliment you by saying that was a really good idea, and I've had a couple people thank me for good ideas that were fellow writers, they handle it so differently that you'd never know. The biggest argument we always had is who can use what certain titles that are similar things like Forlorn Hope or Bird of Prey. Those writers fight over the right to use. The content nobody brought up. And so don't be paranoid. Don't let it hold you back.
Don't let it keep you from writing. And back to the
Or submitting.
button the seat. Button the seat. Fingers on the keyboard, fingers on the pad.
And until it sees sunlight in somebody else's hands, it's not out there. It's never going to go anywhere.
And don't be afraid of it. Yeah. Put it out on your website. Put it out on Amazon's KDP. Do us a favor, get an editor.
Yes, do get an editor. So I want to kind of like address that because we talked a little earlier about like the 70% of crap in indie. And I think that it's actually changed. And the reason it's changed is because indie has now gotten to the point that people are choosing for both. So you're getting authors who are trad authors who are saying, with this particular project, I'm going to go indie because I'm going to be using the same editors that I'm using in my trad. I'm going to be using the same book designers. I'm going to be using the same cover designers. And so if you can put together an indie book with a traditional quality, then look out. And yes, get it edited.
Well,
Definitely.
it helps if you've sold several thousand or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands under a legacy publisher.
Well,
Larry
and
Correa
not
is about
always.
to do his first indie book.
Oh, who is?
Larry Correa.
Okay, very cool.
With editors who love, they started indie publishing. The point is, though, that there's really two groups. You can come at it from the top down like that. But where we're getting the dreck are the people who are just putting something out and putting it there, trying to get it on Kindle Unlimited, just throwing it out there, writing 15, 60,000 word novels a year to get the setup and see if people will give it eyeballs, etc. And most of them, I read Kindle Unlimited and I'll read a series. I would estimate 50%. I stopped 25 pages into the first book of those series because I know this is not a writer I'm going to read. The others can do very well. That's leading to an awkward situation in the market where you're getting a few authors everyone trusts because there's no way to find good books in the indie market. And
Right.
that's today's biggest problem.
Except
And
at
so you
collections.
find an author, people find an author they trust or they get lots of positive reviews, more people read them, and it separates them. They're practically trad authors at that point. And
And
it
so
separates.
how do you go
Trad being
about-
traditional, indie being independent. That's probably obvious. You were here. And
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
But just in case.
This is where something like Goodreads comes in because it says, if you like this writer, here are some that are similar. And I don't know of too many other ones that you can trust in that fashion because sometimes Amazon says, well, if you like Kevin J. Anderson, then you'll like Chuck Tingle. And I'm baffled as how their algorithm says you want to go from this to that.
We're all baffled by all their algorithms.
Right.
I think they
Sure it has to do
modify
with
so often
stock.
Yeah, so my question was, how do you go about finding an editor?
I'm curious about how everybody does this. I will tell you, for me, first, because I am still a professional and paid editor, I want to know what their process is. So you want to have a process that you're going to align with. You're going to want to know, what level of copy, the grammatical, all that, the really basic stuff. What level of developmental, like the overall big overarching story ideas. What level of line by line, the detail ideas and really getting it right are they going to do, and how are they going to do that? How are they going to work? Like, how are we going to work back and forth? And then, for me, it's really important that I have an editor who understands my genre that I am writing in, that's a biggie, and who understands my voice. So when they're going to edit, they're going to be somebody who is not trying to rewrite this, hey, if I have this idea, this is how I would write it. They're actually going to make my words better. And again, like we talked about coming to these events, this is one of the places I find them. You can find them in like all sorts of proper organizations online. If you want to go into some of the different, like some of the writers guilds, you can get different things. SFWA is really good for like connecting you. All of these organizations that are established are really good ones for finding whether you're looking at them in print, in person, or online. So it's kind of, I find mine in a variety of places, but then once you find that person who gets you and gets your words right, pay them well.
Right.
Because you want them, because their goal is to make your writing better. So that's kind of my little Trump speech on it, but I'm kind of curious how everybody else goes about their.
A lot of it's networking. I mean, if you're lucky and you get into a trad publisher, a traditional publisher, and you find a good editor there, things have changed so much now that you may be able to hire some of those people on the side.
Yeah.
I've written for a whole bunch of different publishers, and some of the other people that are great writers are also great editors too. Gene Raby is a great editor. Robert King, both work for Watson. They're both great editors. If you work with people that you know, and maybe learn to know from an editing thing, or even personally, that's good. The other thing that will be helpful, especially when you're starting out, is having a writer's room that you can. They're not going to be professional editors, right? I'm in a writer's group with Gene Raby and a bunch of people that don't have nearly the kind of credits Gene and I have. But every one of those people in that group, they're all working on their work, and they all have something to say, and they all have something to tell me that I might not have caught otherwise. So you don't always need super editor, and super editor is much harder to find these days, because as you said, sometimes you're gonna, I'm a very good developmental editor, a pretty good line editor. I'm not a copy editor, right? I worked with people in the newspaper who were, every typo in the newspaper every week at college was a personal affront to them. Right? And they were determined there would be no errors. And God, I wish I could find those people now. I don't even see them in traditionally published books anymore.
No, you don't.
The rule is that you will open the box of books when they arrive. You will open the copy directly to the most offensive typo in the book.
I actually have a law for that. My law is, whatever you do, no matter how long you work on it, and this applies especially to books, is when you get your first copy, you will take it out of the box, you will be very excited, you will open it to a random page, and upon that random page in your work, you will find an error. That's Sullivan's first law, it cannot be violated.
It's going to be a bad error that you will never unsee.
How do you find editors, once again, for you out there, do who you know. Ask a writer who they would recommend. Ask a publisher whom they would recommend, a editor from a publisher. Ask a game designer or a game company that you are interested in. Who does editing for you? I want to get this clean before I send it somewhere. They'll be happy to tell you, because they can, almost no one can give an indie editor enough work to keep them living. So we're always pushing it. I pretty much only use editors who are editors at legacy publishers, helpers in the crew.
Yeah.
Because I know what to get from them and they know the standard that I have.
So then what's the payment structure like usually for?
Well, they will usually have a fee structure. I have friends who have edited by the hour. I have friends who go, the ones who charge a penny a word. One I know who charges 2 pennies a word, and I think that is extortionate. Yeah, I know. It depends on what you need. If you need a developmental editor, it may be worth your while to pay that penny a word. And if I simply need copy editing, I know a lady who is as pristine as you would wish to work with her. If she's available, I would cheerfully pay her money.
They're normally less expensive.
Well, yeah, but
And there's a vast range of what people will
There
charge too.
is.
A lot of people will charge by the manuscript or by, you know,
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah.
By the theoretical type page, which really works out to every 250 words.
right,
something
yeah.
like that. But budget for it, please. Don't think that it's optional. Budget for it. Put this money aside. Assume it's going to cost you $1,000 or a few $1,000s, depending on how long your book is.
And do not take anyone that's advertising on the radio or the television and send their book to them and give them money. Don't do that. Look at the professional work.
And don't take your mom or your best friend either. It
Well,
needs
unless
to
your
be
mom or
some-
your best friend has high qualifications.
That could be true, that could be true, but for the most part, like if it's the person, if they are actually going to edit it, if they're just going to say, oh, this was so good, oh my gosh, and this part, no, I wouldn't change a thing, that's not your editor, that is not your editor, that is your fan, you are so glad that you have somebody who loves you and your work.
There are a number out of genre places you can find editors. Any online magazines that you're familiar with that you read and you're writing on a related topic, you can query to them who they use as editors, to edit their stuff. It's almost all done out of house. A lot of writers will, medium level writers who are working their way up, will book a doctor or edit for you and do story edits and everything to tell you what will work on it. Some very talented writers today are now not doing it anymore. We're doing that 20 years ago.
I trade edits with my friends sometimes.
Yeah,
You know?
absolutely.
Absolutely, and don't underestimate spouse. Ask your spouse if your spouse is literate and a fan to read it.
Yeah, my wife's a librarian who spells that way better than I ever did. She reads all of my.
Bill does my developmental editing.
It's not the copy editing.
No.
I'm a creative
Right.
speller.
He's a wonderful editor. My friend who wrote Paranormal Romance said that Bill was the best editor she ever worked with. And she had 2 New York Times bestsellers and a successful career, but some of her editors were extremely difficult to work with. She prefers somebody who was more understanding.
She just liked me because I didn't charge her.
But there are also agents out there who will edit your manuscripts. You will hire them on the basis of you understand that. So keep in mind that if you hire certain editors, certain agents, they'll edit your work because they know it sells, even if it doesn't go to your voice necessarily, which is why I never took up with a certain agent whom I respect very greatly, but isn't for me.
Yeah, it's I like that you said that it's not for you, but it could be for somebody else. I mean, you have to decide. Yeah, it's a very personal choice.
You want that,
Mhm.
this is the right person.
Yep. Yeah.
And you don't need an editor for your short story. Not until you're getting the novel do you need a real editor. But get a fan group, get somebody else, get someone you don't know well even, if it's a fan. Say, would you read this, tell me what you think about it, and try and get some honest answers. Because a lot of us are conditioned when somebody hands us something to come back with things like, well, you must have had a lot of fun writing it. And not really pop their balloon too badly because you don't want them to hate you for the rest of their life.
That's my problem with writers groups, is people with an axe to grind are going to hate everything, and they're going to cut you down, and something that may be perfectly good and just needs an edit, they'll destroy it, and you along with it.
find a writers group that works for you. They're not all going to be the same. You know, I'm lucky that most of the people in my writers group are handpicked by Jean Raby. She's one of my best friends and has an amazing career as an editor and writer and all this kind of stuff. She doesn't pick bad people. So everyone that I'm getting feedback from in the group are people that are not out to tear me down. They're not out to build themselves up. We're all there to make each other better.
That's great.
In creative ways, and that's what you want.
I like in a writer's group where if you're looking at a group, there's somebody who you can aspire to, that you're like, this is somebody that I want to be like, I want to emulate some of their practices. There's somebody that you're on the level with so that you can understand and talk the industry together. And there's somebody who's going to look up to you so that your own confidence as a writer is being built and so that you're mentoring somebody. So if you have like each of those covered in your writing group, it feels like a good group to me.
We haven't told them how to find a writing group. They don't have one.
Yeah.
That's good.
Ooh, I just got one.
Where
Well, I got asked to do a presentation on AI, and I was the lawyer at the table, and it's called the Barrington Writers Workshop.
In Illinois.
Yeah, here in Illinois.
We
'Cause I
used to
just,
live
there. We used to live in
I
there.
live in Woodstock, so I was in Barrington. And it's been around, I guess, for several decades, and since the pandemic, it went virtual. So now I just do a virtual weekly meeting, and we read each other's stuff.
Barrington Law.
Do you have feedback? Do you have people that you read with, or?
Both my parents are college professors. So I get a lot of feedback. My mom actually had to talk to my dad the first time I asked them to edit my short story because he's like, you can't give this to her. This will kill her. You have to tone it down.
Oh, I was that editor.
It's like, this is dripping in red.
I've done that.
And it's like,
When I was
12.
younger.
You can't do this.
Tell you whether it's your first sex scene.
Hopefully I will have moved out by then. No, but in middle school, I actually had a really great writers group, and sadly we all went to different high schools. But they were just like, we all went to the same club. So like, even if you're like in a book club or something at your local library, you can find writers through that.
Oh, yeah.
Library is very much.
Libraries.
Just about every library
A lot of
now.
high schools have them, a lot of colleges have them.
Library ones, be careful who's running it.
Yeah.
A lot of youths who think they know everything can destroy a
Oh, God,
writer's group.
yes.
We had one of those up in, where was it, Barrington? No, it was in,
No, it's kind of off.
it was Kent.
Our new home,
Near Atlanta.
during the pandemic, which is when we moved down there, this woman wanted to start things, but all she ever wanted to do was talk about her own book.
Yeah.
And it wasn't even the whole book, she had written a chapter in it.
Of course.
In 6 years.
You can't have that monopolization. You
Well,
have to
it
be.
destroyed the group.
Has to be egalitarian.
And we're going, we've written 70-something between us. Can we talk?
Well,
She
you
did not
can,
like the fact that we had experience.
you can go through and obviously you're gonna have to test the waters a little bit, right? Multiple groups, you'll find something that's a better fit, Cinderella, one of those shoes will fit, and then, you'll get the type of feedback that you need.
Writers conferences, that's really great.
Yeah.
Going to conferences, finding,
Local cons.
yep, all of that. You're gonna find the people that you like their vibe, you like what they're doing, you like their energy, because that's actually sometimes even more important than what's on their table. Because, like you were talking about, the woman who's like, she's monopolizing, If somebody is like really, really talented, but they don't have room for any voice except for their own, it's probably not gonna be a good fit. So like, if
And walk
somebody,
away.
yeah,
Don't stay. If it doesn't feel right, don't stay. Walk
Don't
away.
waste your time.
that's a good point.
A friend of mine found her writers group. She belongs to 3 on Facebook. And now they meet on Discord, but she communicates with them weekly. She's gotten very close to them. I don't know how many of them she's actually ever met in real life.
Right?
But that
Right, yeah.
Maybe that
We
helps.
used to be in person.
Honestly,
you're right about
But that group dynamic, that can also help, like as Steve said, like if you're button chair, like you're gonna get motivated.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I'm excited to this is part.
Yeah, and if you're having trouble with that, I've my friend David Annandale, who writes Warhammer books and Dr. Doom and that kind of stuff, up in Canada. When we struggled, he and I become fast friends over the last couple of years. There have been times when we've been having struggle with writing. You can actually do a little writing challenge with each other. Set up during the day. Okay, I'm starting writing now. You're starting writing now. We're gonna try to at least get 500 words, and that can be really inspiring. If you need something that's going,
People-
there's a name for it. Like,
Yeah.
spacing
Well,
out on
people
it.
will do like live streaming like sprints.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. It's writing.
And I loved those when I was getting started because like I would hop onto like a YouTube live or something and I'm not actively in the room with that person, but I'm like talking with other people in the chat if I'm like getting a drink of water in a break and they're talking about what their word count's at and you can like get some encouragement like that without, and that kind of helps with like social anxiety too a little bit. Like I don't feel like going to a library today to try to find people to work with. So there are other resources.
Writing is a very solitary occupation. Anything like a writer's group, a sprint group, or anything like that helps you to stay sane.
Oh my God, people.
And it helps your partner or spouse to stay sane and not hate you too.
The way I ended up in my writers group was Gene saying, "Steve, you don't get out enough. You're joining my writers group."
Doing
Okay,
homeschool
for you,
during
Dean.
COVID, that was rough.
Oh, yeah.
Can't say as someone who's in like 7th grade during COVID, that sucked.
So,
Did not want to
So
be
sorry.
around my parents 24 hours a day.
so sorry.
So
I
sorry.
was very glad I did for
My
doing
parents would disown me.
You have another question?
Yeah, it seemed like we're like the natural
Go
starting
right
point
in.
for that part of the conversation. Now that we've talked about editing and writers groups, I feel like maybe beta readers is a good topic, perhaps, and how that plays. So maybe talk about beta readers generally, and then maybe discuss the line between beta reading versus editing.
Oh, boy.
Is that
I
a
just-
good topic?
I just got done with an experience that I do not want to repeat. I should not have worked with this small publisher again, but I did. They had 6 or 7 beta readers on each story for the anthology I was writing for.
Oh, yikes.
And I got a 9-page editorial letter for a 7-page story.
Oh.
The problem with some, if you run into some beta readers, is they feel the need, they have to say something, and negatives are easier to say. So especially inexperienced beta readers are a nightmare. Unknowledgeable beta readers are a nightmare. I'll never forget getting a note back on a Warrior Brief, which was a best-selling military series I was doing with William R. Keith. And at the start, the first line of the first paragraph is a captain higher than a major? I thought that the captain was higher than a major. And I'm like, it's a Navy captain, they are majors. You know,
If
and you
only
know the
there was
rest of the
some
editorial.
source of all the world's information we had at our fingertips that we could type in and find things like that.
And you know that person's not qualified to read it. So you gotta be careful you pick someone who understands the genre enough to know what you're doing.
And I have like a beta reader contract. And what I put in that, and I'm more than happy, if you stop down at my booth, you can see me right when you walk in the hall. I'll go ahead, I'll send that to you.
I'd love to.
Except not tomorrow because I'll
Yeah,
be at
that's
this all
great.
day.
And,
So it's Sunday.
oh, that's true, yeah. Ivy's working my booth.
Not tomorrow.
So step by step. But I put in there the expectations of like, because I also, not only do I not want them to do things that are like, okay, you just want to say the negative thing, but I also don't want them to do the, oh, I liked this and this and this, because sometimes you'll have fans who want to be your beta readers. And so I tell them, this is the kind of critiques I'm seeking. And I really like, it's a 1 page, it's not a ton. And I tell them, if reading this page is too much for you, you are disqualified from being a beta reader. And I do because I use them only on my longer projects. To have a 9-page feedback on a 7-page, that's unworthy, that's ridiculous. So I use them on my longer projects, and I have a team that's genre specific, and I give them the guidelines for the kind of feedback, and I tell them, I am taking all of your feedback in addition to my 2 editors that I'm working with. And while I may express a like or dislike of this idea, that doesn't mean it's going to change what's in the book. They know that their purpose is to provide the feedback.
To get the
By
juices
the
flowing.
way, she told them, take it the way it is, or just send it.
Well, I did make some changes, and then the rest of it I said, you know what, I'm not dealing with this, I'll withdraw the story.
Yeah.
Never went away.
There's another kind of feedback editor that is valuable in some cases, and I will line them out once I say the words sensitivity reader.
Yep.
Because
That's
it's going to make people go completely crazy, but if you do not belong to the social, ethnic, or cultural group about whom you are writing, it behooves you to talk to someone who is.
There's
And
resources. Resources
Yeah.
are so important.
And where to find them? I call the local universities. And so I look for the grad students in different programs. I look for their different cultural organizations on campus, and I talk to the heads of those departments and get their recommendations. That's how I tend to fill mine out.
Or find an organizational group from the one you're in. There are many tribal councils and organizations, and all of them will refer you to someone who will tell you if you should use this word, shouldn't you. You had a big thing of practice.
And cultivate a wide group of friends
Yes,
of various
absolutely.
types.
Go to cons.
Yeah.
We're all here.
make friends with different kinds of people. They will give you wonderful perspectives on other cultures. My niece-in-law is an Onondaga Indian. And I turned a story over to her that had Indian references. The main character was a native boy. And I said, I already don't like what this writer is doing with this particular thing here. So I've already noticed these things. What else is here that are red flags? Tell me, because I will make him change it.
Yeah.
And she came back and said, this isn't used like this is never used like this. And no Indian ever thinks of themselves as red face, or I forgot.
Redskin.
Yeah.
Redskin.
Redskin.
And yeah, that one was already.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyhow, yeah, it's,
Don't base it on the early gaming module.
hey, I wrote those.
Yeah, but you kept going, so you kept going. You
Yeah.
probably
I
use
never did
sensitivity
that.
research.
Right.
I
Something that I
Goes
think
back
is
to Vegas, which I think. Go
yeah,
ahead.
something that I think is also important on that is it might seem like it's a lot of work to reach out to the proper resources, and it's like, well, there's people like that on like Reddit and Facebook, so I'll just go ask them. No. You have to put in the work if you want to receive the same kind of feedback.
Real.
You have to put in as much work as like the good you want to receive.
Isn't that akin to like giving your information away though, when you put it on Reddit or
No.
Facebook?
No. On Reddit or Facebook, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, on like Reddit.
So now
or
they know I'm
Facebook,
writing a
yeah.
story about X, so what?
Well, that's true. Yeah, back to the original.
Yeah.
I mean, great,
And
you know?
don't be afraid about making mistakes, because as someone wise with Maya Angelou said, do the best you can. When you know better, do better.
Right.
Yep.
Right? So,
Try to be as educated as possible, but I mean, we're never going to be knowledgeable about everything. Sadly, I mean, that'd be great.
yeah.
Correct all
Been
the
kind of at the
problems.
edge of egalitarianism for the last close to 50 years now, but there's still stuff. It's like, okay, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that. I would do that better. So, know that it's people get hung up thinking there's a goalpost that they can just put there, and once they get there, they're there. And writing is never that. No matter
The
what.
more you write, the more you realize you aren't doing what you could, and the more you need to learn for every day of your life.
Yep.
Carlin was saying that to you at that Comic-Con?
I was at a Comic-Con a very long time ago, and I would have to go back in time and count backwards to figure out when this is, but you can date it if you know anything about Harlan Ellison and when he was born. I was at a Chicago Comic-Con at the O'Hare Expo Center, sitting
there.
with.
I'm seriously.
Okay, there were 6 or 7 of us at a table.
Okay.
Neil Gaiman was one of the keynote speakers at the time before we all knew what he was doing with his
I
life.
wasn't with you, but I was at that con.
Okay. Yeah, it was a lot of
Yes,
fun.
you were.
Harlan Ellison came up and he was going down the table and saying about, okay, I like your last book. yeah, when's the next one coming out? Haven't read anything of yours yet. Looks interesting. And he came to Max Allan Collins, who was sitting next to me. And he turned to me and said, "Don't you realize by sitting next to this man, you can lose your reputation entirely?"
Holy crap.
Oh,
They were old friends.
oh,
Yeah,
God.
Max is an old friend of mine too, geez.
But Jenny said to you,
Then he came to me and he looked at, and he poked at my nameplate and said, "Good writer, but I like your independent work a lot more than I like your collaborations." Harlan Ellison has been reading my books. Holy
That's
crap.
and Benny said,
Thank you, I can do this. I said, I was sitting among a lot of very experienced writers who have a lot of talent, and I was by far the most junior person at that table. And I said, I feel like a phony sitting here talking, with all of these people. And he said, I'm 57 years old, and I have always felt as if I'm faking it. And I've always feared that someday someone's going to figure out that I've been faking it all these years and come and take away everything that I have earned over the course of my career. So it was very kind of him. He was always really nice to me. I know people that he has had ongoing spats with. I know he was famous for not hitting first, but never stopping hitting back. But he was very encouraging to young writers, and he was so nice to me that day. It meant a lot to me to have him say that imposter syndrome is real. We all have it in a certain time, a certain way. Some people never get past it.
Sometimes you get past it, but it comes back and gets you later.
Yeah.
the fact is, when we were young, we idolized writers. We love the people creating what we love. And then we become one, and we just can't live up to the standards of what we thought they were like. And we had the infinite pleasure of knowing many of these people that were 20 years older, and I was working with them, and 30 years older, that were the people that we read to go into it. And I know where all the pimples and flaws are now, but I still feel like an imposter when I talk about their books compared to mine and things.
What year was that since you were there?
Oh, God.
He died in 85, 3 years ago, so that would have been about 31 years ago.
Yeah, that's probably
A little bit ago. We're getting close to the end. Does anybody else have any finishing questions they want to ask before we finish? Okay. I guess basically what we should, go ahead. I was going to say we should go through and do a closing.
Button the seat and put yourself out there. Entering contests is a good thing if it's a reliable contest. The way I got to work at TSR was back in the day, Dragon Magazine, which you were talking about earlier, had contests. They had a Draw the Monster contest, and I came in third on a thing I did in high school in an afternoon, because I had an afternoon. I was at my friend's house. I had nothing to do. I had watercolor thing. I had Errol Otis, I point out, which is the only time that'll ever happen. Then they had.
He's here today. Did you go rub that in?
What?
Is it he's here today? Did you go rub it in? Remember when?
No, I was sharing an office with Errol for many years, so that's long past. Then they had a Design the Dungeon contest, and I sat down at a keyboard in college and typed that up for 2 weeks, I think, to design my little dungeon. Sent that in. I placed second in that contest.
That one
And
was a
then
nightmare.
someone just ran that. Told me, hey, I just ran your module from Dragon Magazine 32 or whatever. Yeah, that was like 44 years I've been waiting for someone to say that. And then they started looking for staff editors and writers and stuff, and I sent my stuff in. And that's how I got the interview that got me the job, that got me all the rest of this dubious fame and non-fortune and that kind of stuff. But put yourself out there, take the risk, do it, do what you did.
We promise fun and fame, no fortune.
Yeah, fun, fame, no fortune. Don't do this to get rich. Don't do this to get famous.
And you can live an exotic life if you
So my finishing thought is we kind of did a lot of focus on like the traditional side. And I want to like kind of jump back to what we said at the very beginning. And we were like, when you're putting yourself out there, what is your purpose in it? And that's going to come into play with whether you're doing traditional or indie as well. So like there are a lot of these different things, traditional, that are career building and that are like you're playing the long game, you know, and then there's a lot of the indie stuff that you can do along the way that's going to be the short game to keep you rolling on the long game. And so we didn't really dig into the mechanics of trad and indie, but we're all around and we love talking to you guys. So, you know, find us and we can, if you have those specific questions, I know any one of us up here are happy to.
Publishing indie can help you to get into trade.
Absolutely.
It used to be anathema to self-publish something. It's no longer that case. The whole world has changed.
Yeah.
Twice in my lifetime now, publishing massively changed.
My first
Right,
trad
yeah,
publisher,
twice.
his first question to me was, how many books have you already sold? That was my first trad publisher. There's almost a lot of them today actually expect that you're already out there hustling.
Right.
That's,
For me, it's write what you want to write. Don't let anyone tell you you can't. You may not be able to publish everything,
Right.
but the benefits of indie publishing are things that fall into a gray area that are not easily shelved with one group or another are the perfect things for you to publish yourself, your passion project. Finish it to the best you possibly can with it. Hire an editor and get it out there. Keep trying, keep writing, and if you are crossing cultural or ethnic lines, something that is different, or you're writing about a profession or anything else that you don't know well, reach out to people. People are your very, very best resource. You know, you may.
And we have the internet.
You have the internet, but talking to people is much easier because you don't have to pin it down as tightly. And people will also say, oh, and by the way, you should also include this, or you should also look into that, which the internet won't do. It will just say, here are all of these other rabbit holes you can go down, which are not productive. Try everything. If something is not productive, set it aside, work on something else. You may go back to that thing later on, you may not. There are people with lots and lots and lots of unfinished projects. Some of them are never going to be worth finishing. Learn to understand that and let them go. David Gerald talked to my class at DragonCon once and he said the first 1,000,000 words don't count. You get rejected, you know, your fog book epic doesn't count. It was your first 1,000,000 words. Keep trying, keep practicing. Every time you write something, you learn something.
we held a contest. Kevin Anderson won. It was, how many rejection letters can you produce? 274 was his record.
No, it was the other.
Stephen King used to have a whole wall full of
It
them,
was
right?
more than that.
We had a railroad spike.
It was like.
Did you?
No, he did. I read his memoir, and he had a railroad spike, and then it got full. So then he had to get another one, and then he couldn't get any more railroad spikes, so he had to put them up on his wall.
They were just bathroom with them.
You gotta keep trying.
Funny word, why do you write? You don't need money.
No, but it's a way I can be creative and share that creativity with other people and hopefully inspire them and use my knowledge and creativity to help, the world. I'm interested in politics, but if I can say those things through fiction, that's even better.
Oh, that's the only way.
Rod Serling.
Correct.
Even in China, you can still do that.
Why do you write?
Pardon?
Why do you write?
Because they pay me.
Dr. Samuel Johnson once said, no one but a fool ever wrote except for money.
She can't help but write. I like writing, but I've had to train out of it to make money to support us for many decades. Not it's her fault. She was making more than me half the time because she's a better writer. But why do I write is a good turnabout. Is simply because it feels good. It's something you have to do. Dr. Asimov once said to us that if you don't have to write, don't bother. If you've got to sit down and write, if you want to write, if you go a while and then you haven't created anything that bothers you,
Yeah.
you're a writer.
Yeah.
And you're going to be happy writing because it fulfills a part of you. He was once told that he was exhausted and he had to go somewhere, and it's in the day of computers, where he would relax. So they booked a cottage for him for 3 or 4 weeks in the Adirondacks at a resort with no electricity, a Vanta Nature Resort. The second day he was there, he stole the typewriter and 2 reams of paper out of the office. They couldn't figure out where it went until the end. And when he went home, Dr. Asimov's Guide to Humor, which is a 425-page book of nothing but jokes and shabby dog stories, came home with him.
That's
That's
our
our cue.
That's our cue.
So thank you everybody for coming.
Wait, before we leave, get a quick picture of
Sure, I sure can.
Later.
Yes, I'll text it to Jeri.
And somebody needs to get my swag bag.
Perfect. I'll take a couple here.
Cool. It's true. Sure it's good.
Yeah, and
Builds up.
Jeri will get it.
Trust me.
we have swag bag.
It doesn't stick.
Swag bags?
Oh,
Maybe the server in the front.
sir, in the
Sure,
front.
it's in the
Whoever had the most questions.
There's pencils.
There's pencils. I can see that.
I know we have, but it's amazing to me. We have it before.